We began the church year here at St. Philip Deacon with some new Advent paraments, and today I'd like to talk about why they are important. Stay tuned. Hello, friends. Pastor Tim Westermeyer here, Senior Pastor of St. Philip Deacon in the western suburbs of Minneapolis. Good to be with you as always, and good to be with you after a week away. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I know that feels like a while ago now, but we're actually taping this a week after Thanksgiving. We took a little week off. Tim was out of town, and I was busy doing some things. So I hope you had a wonderful time with family and friends. As I mentioned this past weekend, we began a new church year on Sunday. So it was the first Sunday of Advent, which strikes me, among other things, as an opportunity to just reflect on some basics of our faith. So if you are interested and you want to listen to my sermon, one of the things I did is I walked through the 24 stained glass panels in our sanctuary, which recount the biblical story from Genesis all the way to Revelation, and surround us physically when we enter into that sanctuary to worship, which is one of the many reasons I love the sanctuary, is that it reminds us that we're part of that story. On Sunday, we also unveiled or used for the first time our brand new Advent Paraments. So I have my stole here. The stole is what we pastors wear over our shoulders. We'll get some shots of the altar cloth and the cloth of the ambo as well, I think, for this episode. These are beautiful. They're part of an emphasis right now to update and refresh all of the paraments through the various seasons of the church year. And we got a lot of wonderful compliments about them, appropriately so. They're fabric art, and they do a lot to beautify the sanctuary. It occurred to me, though, that a person might say, well, you're the church, you're supposed to be helping people. Why are you making investments in liturgical art? And that reminded me of another, again, we're at the beginning of the church year, another framework to think about some of the basics of our faith, which is related to these paraments. I've talked about this at least once. I'm sure, I don't remember when. It may have been a very long time ago. But an important theologian of the 20th century distilled down the work of the church into three priorities. They were worship, to evangelize, and to serve the poor. Importantly, part of his point was you can never collapse the work of the church into only one of those things. You really have to keep all three of those things in balance. So, worship, obviously we gather to worship both in the sanctuary. There are also other kinds of worship, maybe prayer, meditation, reflection, that kind of thing. Evangelization, I think it's attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, who I'll say something about in a minute, and maybe to Mother Teresa. The line is, we should, as Christians, we should preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words. So evangelization doesn't just mean, walking in your neighborhood, knocking on people's doors and saying the word Jesus. Evangelization has to do with how we live in such a way that people might be inclined to ask, what informs the way you live? Why are you, for example, so generous, and so forth? So anyway, evangelization, and then serving the poor. And importantly, serving the poor doesn't just mean serving those who are financially poor, although it certainly means that, but it also means serving anyone who is at the margins, emotionally, physically, who's alienated from community in some way, right? And so as Christians, part of that emphasis means we always have to be looking out for those who are, again, on the margins. Again, part of the point here, and I've picked this up from someone who I think does an amazing job of distilling Christianity and communicating it using new media, namely Bishop Robert Barron. One of the things he reminds us about that I just learned about actually this week is that I mentioned St. Francis of Assisi. if our instinct is to say, well, really, the main thing the church is supposed to do is to serve the poor, we could look to someone like St. Francis of Assisi, who famously was concerned with the poor and who himself lived a life of poverty. And you might think, well, he would certainly have emphasized poverty and serving the poor above all those other things. And it turns out, if you study his life, what you find is he had a deep commitment to beautiful worship, including things like the paraments that are used in worship. Part of it, one of his lines, I think I have this correct, was that only the best should be offered to God. So again, while he himself lived a life of poverty, he believed strongly that a worship space, a sanctuary, should be constructed and ornamented in such a way as to glorify God. Another person who felt very similarly was another saint, Catholic saint named Saint Jean Vianney, who similarly lived a life of poverty but prioritized the beauty of worship, in so much so that he used what little money he had to buy new altar furnishings and exquisite vestments. I'm reading here from a note, despite his personal poverty. And he also thought that only the best was good enough for God in terms of worship. So I was just reflecting on this, given, again, these gorgeous, beautiful new paraments, which it turns out are an investment. And I'm grateful, by the way, I mentioned this on Sunday, I'm grateful to everyone from St. Philip the Deacon who's helped to make the acquisition of these beautiful vestments possible, not only for Advent, but we also got new vestments for both Easter and Christmas. So we'll see the Christmas ones again in a few weeks. And we just ordered new vestments for Lent, the Lenten season, and all of them, I hope and pray, do indeed help us to worship God more fully, so that we can also evangelize, share the news of God, of the good news of God, and serve the poor more effectively. But remembering that we never should collapse our work as a community of faith or as the Christian body to only one of those things. So I hope you'll join us in worship sometime soon, if you haven't had a chance to do that in a while, to take a look at these beautiful vestments in use. There's also going to be a little bit of a surprise in a couple weeks for the third week of Advent, and I'll say more about that maybe in another episode, but keep an eye out for that. And again, I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I wish you Advent blessings as we anticipate the wonder and beauty of Christmas. And until next time, as always, be well, stay in touch, and God bless.